The first thing people noticed was the smell. Wet mud, dead weeds, that thick, swampy smell rolling across million-dollar patios, while Patricia Thornwell stood on the HOA clubhouse stage, smiling into a microphone like she was running for mayor. "Welcome to our annual Lakeside Summer Celebration," she shouted while golf carts lined the shoreline and kids waved little HOA flags near the water. Then somebody screamed. Not excited screaming. Panic screaming. "Why's the lake moving?" Every head turned at once. The waterline was dropping. Fast. You could actually hear it. A deep sucking sound echoing across the lake, while expensive wooden docks creaked and tilted sideways inch by inch. One pontoon boat slammed against the muddy bottom hard enough to make people jump. Patricia's smile vanished so fast it looked painful. Residents rushed toward the shoreline holding phones up, filming the water pulling away from their properties like somebody had unplugged the entire lake. And standing 200 yards away beside the old concrete spillway gate was me, Grant Holloway, clipboard in one hand, thermos in the other, calm as a Sunday morning. Sheriff Boone stood next to me with his hands hooked through his belt loops, not saying a word. Patricia stormed across the grass so fast her white heels sank into the mud. "What the hell are you doing?" she screamed loud enough for everybody to hear. "You can't drain HOA property." I looked down at the pressure gauge mounted beside the spillway wheel. "Actually," I said, "state law says I have to." That shut everybody up for about 3 seconds. Then all hell broke loose. People started yelling over each other. Somebody shouted about property values. Another guy demanded to know why his dock was sitting crooked. One woman looked ready to cry because her backyard beach had turned into 30 feet of black mud right in front of her guests. Patricia pointed a shaking finger at me like she wanted the sheriff to arrest me on the spot. "You're destroying this community," she snapped. But Sheriff Boone didn't move, didn't even blink. He just looked at her and said, "Ma'am, county engineers approved the emergency spillway release this morning." That was the moment the crowd changed sides. You could feel it happen. 10 seconds earlier, they looked at Patricia like she was queen of the neighborhood. Now they were staring at her like maybe she forgot to tell them something important. I unscrewed my thermos slowly and took a sip of coffee while water thundered through the spillway gates behind me. "You should have paid the repair bill," I said. Patricia's face went pale. Not angry pale. Scared pale. Because she knew exactly what repair bill I meant. $30,000. That's all it would have taken. 30 grand to fix the cracked spillway wall before spring runoff season hit the mountains. 30 grand the HOA refused to pay because Patricia called it Grant's personal problem. Funny thing about water, though. Water doesn't care about HOA meetings. Water doesn't care about luxury lakefront branding. And water definitely doesn't care about rich people pretending they own infrastructure they've never bothered to understand. If you've ever dealt with somebody who thought money made them smarter than everybody else, drop a comment below because trust me, this woman was something special. 6 months earlier, I honestly thought Patricia Thornwell was just another pushy HOA president with too much free time and a Range Rover payment she wanted everybody else to admire. Turns out she was sitting on inspection reports she never showed residents. Reports warning that the old spillway holding back their precious private lake was one hard storm away from becoming a legal nightmare. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you how a quiet mountain reservoir my grandfather built in 1968 turned into the most expensive mistake Patricia Thornwell ever made. My grandfather used to say water tells the truth faster than people do. I did not understand what he meant when I was a kid. Back then I just thought the spillway was loud and smelled weird in the summer. Every Saturday morning, he would drag me out of bed before sunrise, hand me a flashlight, and make me walk the dam with him while freezing mountain wind slapped us in the face. "Concrete talks," he would say while tapping cracks with a rusted wrench. Most folks are too stupid to listen. At 8 years old, I thought that sounded crazy. At 49, standing beside that same spillway watching a luxury HOA panic because their lake was disappearing, I finally understood exactly what he meant. My family owned that reservoir long before anybody dreamed about gated communities and lakefront yoga decks. My grandfather Walter Holloway built the original retention dam in 1968 with a county water partnership after 2 bad flood seasons nearly wiped out the valley downstream. Back then this place was not rich. No fancy stone entrances. No golf carts. Just logging roads, fishing cabins, and hardworking people trying to survive mountain winters without losing their homes every spring. The reservoir served two jobs. First, it held water during snowmelt season, so downstream farms would not flood. Second, it kept enough water stored through dry summers so cattle ranches and old fishing properties could survive drought years. It was not glamorous. It was infrastructure. Real infrastructure. The kind nobody notices until it stops working. My grandfather spent 30 years maintaining that spillway himself. Every bolt, every drainage gate, every concrete inspection. When my father took over, he treated the dam the same way. Like responsibility, not business. Then life happened. My dad passed from a heart attack at 56. My wife Emily got sick 3 years later. Cancer. Fast and ugly. We spent almost 2 years driving between hospitals while the world slowly shrank down to test results, insurance calls, and quiet nights pretending things would somehow be okay. During those years, I barely thought about the reservoir. I only came up maybe once every couple months to check the gauges and clear debris from the spillway grates. But Emily loved this place, especially in October when the aspens turned gold around the lake and morning fog floated across the water like smoke. Sometimes she would sit on the old wooden bench near the control gate wrapped in 3 blankets drinking coffee while I checked pressure readings. "This place breathes different," she told me once. "It feels honest here." After she died, I stopped sleeping right for almost a year. The silence in our house down in Denver felt unbearable. Every room reminded me of her. Every grocery store aisle. Every stupid commercial on television. So I moved back to the reservoir full-time. Most people think grief looks loud. It does not. Most days it just looks like a guy standing alone beside cold water, trying to remember how to exist again. The spillway became my routine. Every morning at 6 o'clock sharp, I walked the concrete wall with a flashlight and clipboard exactly like my grandfather used to. I checked seepage lines, measured water elevation, cleared driftwood after storms. Normal boring stuff nobody cares about unless they understand what happens when water systems fail. Here is the thing most HOA people never understand. Owning property near water is not the same thing as controlling the water itself. Those giant lakefront houses sitting around the reservoir? Pretty views. Expensive decks. Fancy landscaping. None of that meant they owned the dam. They only owned the scenery. I owned the responsibility. And responsibility comes with paperwork. A lot of paperwork. State inspection reports. Army Corps maintenance agreements. County drainage permits. Emergency release authority. Liability clauses thicker than phone books. If the spillway failed during runoff season, people downstream could lose homes. Roads could wash out. The state would not blame the HOA. They would blame me. That mattered later. A lot more than Patricia Thornwell realized. Funny enough, when Patricia first showed up, I actually tried being polite. Big mistake. She moved into the neighborhood about 2 years before the disaster started. White Range Rover. Cashmere sweaters. Smile sharp enough to cut steel cable. The kind of woman who says community standards every 5 minutes like it is part of her religion. The first time I met her, she walked straight onto the spillway platform, wearing heels completely wrong for mountain terrain, and said, "You should really modernize this area. It is hurting property values." I remember staring at her for a second because I honestly thought she was joking. Then she pointed toward the old warning signs near the floodgate controls. "Those look industrial," she said. "People buying lake homes do not want industrial." That was the first moment I realized Patricia Thornwell saw the reservoir as decoration, not infrastructure. Decoration. And that misunderstanding eventually cost her everything. Patricia Thornwell did not walk into a room. She arrived in it like she expected background music. Every single time. The woman somehow managed to overdress for mountain living in ways that honestly impressed me. Cashmere coats in 70-degree weather. White leather gloves near muddy shoreline paths. Sunglasses bigger than some dinner plates. And always that pearl white Range Rover rolling through the community like the Queen of England was late for a board meeting. The strange part was how fast people fell for her act. Within 6 months of moving into the neighborhood, Patricia somehow convinced half the lake residents she was saving the community from collapse. Suddenly, everybody was talking about elevating property values and modernizing the waterfront experience, like they were reading from the same script. Old fishing cabins started disappearing. Rustic wood docks got replaced with polished composite decking and expensive boat lifts. The quiet little mountain reservoir I grew up around started looking less like Montana and more like a luxury resort brochure. Patricia loved brochures. She carried them everywhere. Thick, glossy things filled with drone photos of sunrise reflections over the lake and smiling couples drinking wine beside fire pits. Across the front in giant silver letters, it said Silver Ridge Private Lake Community. That wording mattered more than people realized. Private lake community. Not reservoir. Not flood control system. Not county-regulated water structure. Patricia understood marketing. She understood image. But she did not understand the giant concrete spillway quietly holding the entire illusion together. The first real problem started at an HOA board meeting 3 months after Patricia became president. I only went because Sheriff Boone called me personally and said, "Grant, you better come hear this nonsense yourself." So I drove down to the clubhouse after finishing a gate inspection and walked into what looked less like a community meeting and more like a luxury hotel conference. Charcuterie trays, bottled sparkling water, real estate banners hanging beside framed photos of the lake at sunset. Patricia stood at the front in a cream-colored blazer, holding a laser pointer like she was presenting military strategy. "Our community deserves consistency," she announced while clicking through PowerPoint slides. "We cannot attract premium buyers while outdated industrial structures remain visible from shoreline properties." Then she clicked to a giant photo of my spillway control gate projected across the room wall. Red circles highlighted warning signs, drainage pipes, and maintenance rails. "These features create visual pollution," she said. Visual pollution. I almost laughed out loud. That visual pollution was the only reason their million-dollar homes were not underwater during spring runoff. Patricia kept talking while residents nodded along like trained seals. "We propose landscaping enhancements around the spillway corridor along with restricted maintenance access hours to improve lake aesthetics." I finally raised my hand. "Restricted maintenance?" I asked. "You cannot restrict spillway access. It is regulated infrastructure." Patricia gave me that fake smile she always used when pretending to be polite. "Grant, we appreciate your passion for the old system, but the community board now oversees lake appearance standards." Oversees lake appearance standards. There it was again. Appearance. She still thought this was about scenery. I looked around the room and realized something dangerous. Most of these people actually believed her. They saw kayaks, sunsets, and waterfront property taxes. They did not see pressure ratings. They did not see drainage risk maps. They definitely did not see what happened if somebody ignored maintenance too long. One older resident named Carl Jensen finally spoke up from the back row. Carl had lived near the reservoir almost as long as my family. "Patricia," he said carefully, "that dam is not decorative. HOAs maintain that thing for a reason." Patricia smiled without even looking at him. "With respect, Carl, modern engineering standards have evolved significantly since the 1960s. That sentence hit me like a warning bell, because I knew exactly what she was doing. She was setting the stage. Little by little, she was convincing residents the old spillway system was outdated, unnecessary, and standing in the way of her luxury vision for the community. Then came the part that really got my attention. Patricia clicked to another slide showing projected HOA expansion plans. New docks, expanded shoreline patios, artificial beach areas. And right there on the edge of the rendering sat proposed construction dangerously close to the emergency drainage channel. I leaned forward immediately. "You cannot build there," I said. "That area floods during emergency release." Patricia folded her arms. "Our consultants disagree." "What consultants?" I asked. She paused half a second too long. "Private development consultants." That was the moment my stomach tightened, because no qualified water engineer would ever approve construction near that runoff corridor. Not unless somebody lied to them. Or worse, never asked one in the first place. Patricia moved on like nothing happened. "The future of Silver Ridge depends on maximizing the lake lifestyle experience." There it was again. Lake lifestyle. She talked about the reservoir like it was a swimming pool behind a country club. Meanwhile, I kept staring at those construction drawings, thinking the exact same thing over and over. Wrong place. Wrong plans. Wrong woman to be making decisions about water. And the worst part? She had absolutely no idea how expensive that ignorance was about to become. About a month after that HOA meeting, the mountain storms started early. Real Montana storms. Not the cute little rain showers people post on social media. I am talking cold black clouds rolling over the peaks like freight trains while thunder rattled cabin windows hard enough to wake you at 3 in the morning. The reservoir climbed almost 4 feet in 6 days. That got my attention fast. Every morning, I walked the spillway checking pressure readings while freezing. Rain soaked through my jacket. And every morning, I noticed the same thing. The concrete seam along the east retaining wall was widening. Slowly, barely visible if you did not know what to look for. But I knew. Water always leaves clues. I crouched near the drainage channel one morning and ran my fingers across the crack line. Damp. Warmer than the surrounding concrete, too. Seepage pressure. Not catastrophic yet, but dangerous if spring runoff hit before repairs got done. I drove straight to the county engineering office that afternoon with photos, pressure measurements, and inspection logs. County engineer Melissa Carter took one look at the numbers and sighed. "Grant, this needs repair work before snowmelt season," she said. "You are still within safety range, but not by much." "How much are we talking?" I asked. She tapped her calculator for maybe 10 seconds. Temporary stabilization, concrete injection, gate reinforcement, drainage clearing. Probably around $30,000 minimum. 30 grand. I leaned back in the chair staring at the paperwork. Expensive, sure, but manageable if everybody shared responsibility fairly. Because here is the thing Patricia never understood. The reservoir did not exist just for me. Every lakefront homeowner benefited from that dam, holding stable water levels year-round. Without controlled retention, their pretty shoreline properties would turn into muddy seasonal runoff land half the year. So I did things the right way. Calm. Professional. Documented. I paid an engineering firm for a formal repair assessment. I attached county inspection reports. Then I mailed certified letters to the HOA board explaining exactly what needed to happen before spring runoff season. I even broke down the costs clearly. $30,000 split across the HOA reserve fund came out to less than what most of those residents spent on patio furniture. Honestly, I thought Patricia would complain a little, maybe negotiate, then eventually pay. Big mistake. 3 days later, I got summoned to an emergency community finance meeting at the clubhouse. The second I walked in, I knew Patricia had turned the whole thing into theater. Folding. Chairs filled the room. Residents whispering. Coffee stations. Pastries. She even had printed packets waiting at every seat like some corporate seminar. Patricia stood at the front smiling that sharp television anchor smile, while my repair proposal sat projected behind her on a giant screen. "Thank you all for attending on short notice," she announced dramatically. "Unfortunately, certain individuals are attempting to pressure this community into funding personal property upgrades." Then she clicked to a close-up photo of the spillway crack like she was exposing a crime scene. "This outdated structure exists on Mr. Holloway's private land," she continued. "Not HOA property." A few residents nodded immediately. That was the trick Patricia always used. Technically true statements twisted into dishonest conclusions. Yes, the spillway sat on my property, but the reservoir supported their entire lakefront development. Patricia knew that. She just did not want to pay for it. I stood up slowly. "The county inspection reports are in your packets," I said. "This is preventative infrastructure repair. Delaying maintenance increases liability for everyone." Patricia laughed lightly into the microphone. Actually laughed. "Grant," she said, "with all due respect, you sound like somebody trying to sell us fear." A few people chuckled. Then she delivered the line that changed everything. "The community should not be responsible for funding every rusty pipe and concrete crack on private land simply because someone refuses to modernize." There it was again. Appearance over reality. She still thought the spillway was some ugly old relic hurting her luxury branding project. I looked around the room and realized most residents had no clue who to believe. They were dentists, software people, retired executives. Nice enough folks, but they did not understand water systems. Patricia did. Or at least she understood how to control a room full of confused homeowners. One resident finally raised his hand. "What happens if we do nothing?" Patricia answered before I could. "Nothing," she said smoothly. "This reservoir has been here for decades. Mr. Holloway is exaggerating. Hypothetical risks to push maintenance costs onto the HOA. Hypothetical risks." I remember that phrase perfectly because Melissa Carter had used the exact opposite wording in her county report less than 48 hours earlier. Increased structural concern requiring timely mitigation. Patricia was lying straight to their faces. Calmly too, like she practiced it in the mirror beforehand. I reached into my folder and pulled out the certified inspection notice. The county disagrees, I said quietly. Patricia did not even look at the paper. The HOA declines financial participation at this time, she announced immediately. Then she smiled directly at me in front of the whole room. Perhaps if Mr. Holloway managed his property more responsibly, these emergencies would not keep appearing. That hit the room exactly the way she wanted. Suddenly people were staring at me instead of the engineering reports. Like maybe I was the problem. Like maybe the quiet widower maintaining the spillway for 20 years was somehow running a scam. I looked at Patricia for about 3 seconds without saying anything. Then I nodded once, packed my papers back into the folder, and said the same thing my grandfather used to say whenever somebody ignored a water warning. All right, that was it. No yelling, no threats, just one word. Funny thing is, Patricia smiled like she had won something that night. She had absolutely no idea she had just talked herself into the most expensive mistake of her life. After that meeting, Patricia acted like the whole thing was settled forever. She started calling the spillway issue the Holloway maintenance drama anytime somebody brought it up during HOA meetings. That should have told me everything right there. People who understand danger do not joke about it. But Patricia was too busy selling a fantasy. 2 weeks later, she launched something called the Silver Ridge Waterfront Enhancement Initiative. Sounds fancy, right? What it actually meant was construction crews showing up every morning tearing apart shoreline areas that had been stable for decades. Dump trucks rolled through the neighborhood before sunrise carrying gravel, decorative stone, and stacks of lumber for new viewing decks. The quiet mountain reservoir started sounding like a shopping mall parking lot. Nail guns, backup alarms, diesel engines. Every day, Patricia loved it. She drove around in her golf cart checking projects like a movie producer walking through a set. Meanwhile, I kept doing what I always did. Monitoring water levels, logging seepage readings, filing inspection reports. And every single week the crack along the spillway wall widened a little more. Not dramatic enough for panic yet, just enough to keep me awake at night. Then the shoreline problems started. First came the algae blooms. Bright green patches spreading near the western cove where water circulation slowed because sediment buildup had started choking part of the drainage channel. Residents blamed warmer weather at first. Patricia blamed fertilizer runoff from older properties. Funny how she always found a way to blame somebody else. Then one morning I noticed 3 expensive docks sitting crooked at weird angles. Water levels had started fluctuating more than normal because the damaged gate system could not regulate pressure correctly anymore. Small changes at first. Maybe 4 inches one day, 6 inches another. But lakefront homeowners notice every inch when they pay 7 figures for a waterfront view. Suddenly Patricia's office phone started ringing nonstop. My boat lift is scraping bottom. Why does the shoreline smell weird? Why is the water cloudy near our property? She tried smoothing things over with cheerful community emails. Temporary seasonal conditions. Natural environmental variation. Nothing to worry about. But nature has a funny way of exposing lies faster than people do. One afternoon, Sheriff Boone stopped by while I was cleaning debris from the lower spillway grate. He leaned against the rail watching muddy water swirl through the channel. Community Facebook page is melting down, he said. People are posting pictures comparing shoreline levels from last summer. I shrugged. Water level instability was listed in the county inspection report. Boone laughed quietly. Yeah, but that report did not come with drone footage and angry retirees. He was right. Residents started noticing everything once social media got involved. Photos spread around the HOA faster than wildfire. Exposed rocks near private docks. Muddy patches where kids normally swam. One homeowner uploaded side-by-side pictures showing his shoreline had receded almost 2 feet since the previous summer. Patricia responded the only way she knew how. More appearances, more speeches, more fake confidence. She organized a lake beautification weekend, complete with catered food trucks and matching HOA volunteer shirts. Imagine 50 people planting flowers beside a reservoir while the actual infrastructure underneath them slowly deteriorated. That was Patricia in a nutshell. Cosmetic solutions for structural problems. During the event, she even walked right up to me near the maintenance road while residents watched from nearby picnic tables. Grant, she said loudly enough for everybody to hear. The community would appreciate it if you stopped spreading fear about the lake. I set down my wrench slowly. I have not spread anything, I said. I sent engineering reports. Patricia smiled like she was talking to a difficult child. Your constant warnings are hurting property values. There it was again. Property values. Not safety. Not infrastructure. Not liability. Just property values. I looked over her shoulder toward the lake where kids were throwing bread to ducks beside a decorative HOA banner that read Luxury Mountain Living. Then I looked back at Patricia. The Spillway does not care about property values, I told her. Concrete either holds or it does not. Her smile twitched for maybe half a second. Tiny reaction. But I noticed it. Patricia was starting to get nervous. Because underneath all the fake confidence and expensive clothing, she knew something important. The problems were becoming visible now. Harder to spin. Harder to hide. That same week, County Engineer Melissa Carter sent another formal recommendation requesting immediate repairs before heavy snowmelt season arrived. I copied the HOA board on everything. Every inspection. Every warning. Every pressure reading. Certified mail. Email backups. Full documentation. Calm. Professional. Strategic. That part matters. A lot of people lose these fights because they get emotional too early. They yell. Threaten. Slam doors. Big mistake. Paperwork beats panic every time. Patricia still thought this was about winning arguments at HOA meetings. I understood it was about building a record. Then came the moment I realized things were even worse than I thought. One rainy Tuesday morning, I drove down to inspect runoff near the eastern drainage channel and found fresh construction stakes hammered directly beside the emergency overflow corridor. My stomach dropped immediately. Somebody had approved new shoreline patios exactly where floodwater needed room to move during emergency release events. I climbed the embankment and found workers unloading paving materials beside marked utility lines. Who approved this? I asked the foreman. He glanced at his clipboard. HOA Development Committee, he said. Lady named Patricia signed off yesterday. I stared at the drainage maps in my head while cold rain soaked through my jacket. If emergency water release became necessary with those new structures blocking runoff flow, the damage would be catastrophic for shoreline properties. And Patricia had just approved construction anyway. That was the exact moment this stopped looking like ignorance and started looking like something much more dangerous. The rain stopped for almost 10 days after I found those construction stakes near the overflow corridor. That should have made me feel better. Instead, it made me nervous. Too quiet. Too calm. Mountain reservoirs are like people sometimes. The silence before trouble usually matters more than the noise after it starts. I spent most of that week digging through old records in my grandfather's storage room above the maintenance garage. Dust everywhere. Old pipe fittings. Rusted tools hanging on nails from the 1970s. The whole place smelled like cold wood and machine oil. My grandfather kept everything. Every permit. Every inspection report. Every county agreement tied together with faded rubber bands inside cracked filing boxes. Most people would have thrown half that stuff away years ago. Grandpa treated paperwork like survival gear. Turns out he was smarter than all of us. Around midnight one night, I found something strange buried inside an old Army Corps engineering folder from 1983. A supplemental water management agreement. Not the standard maintenance paperwork I already knew about. This was different. I sat down right there on the concrete floor reading it twice, because honestly, I thought I misunderstood the first time. The agreement clearly stated that Emergency Spillway Authority remained exclusively under the control of the Holloway property owner regardless of surrounding residential development. Not the county. Not local homeowners. Me. And there was more. Any development obstructing designated runoff corridors automatically voided certain shoreline protection liabilities. I leaned back against the filing cabinet staring at the paper while rainwater dripped outside the garage roof. Patricia had no idea what she had done. None. If her new shoreline projects blocked emergency runoff paths and the reservoir became unstable, state law would require immediate water reduction procedures. Mandatory, not optional. Suddenly, that construction near the overflow corridor made a lot more sense. I drove to county records first thing the next morning. Clerk's office opened at 8:30 sharp. Old brick building downtown with squeaky floors and fluorescent lights that made everybody look tired. Records clerk Martha Ellis knew my family for years. She looked up from her desk when I walked in carrying 3 boxes of paperwork. Grant Holloway, she said. You look like somebody who has not slept in a week. Probably accurate, I answered. I spread the documents across her counter while she adjusted her reading glasses. Easement maps. Original drainage schematics. Army Corps agreements. Martha stayed quiet for almost 5 minutes, flipping pages carefully. Then she stopped cold on one specific document. "Well," she muttered softly. "That is interesting." "What?" I asked. She slid the page toward me. "Patricia's HOA expansion permits reference shoreline recreational zones only. There is no approved modification for emergency runoff access." My stomach tightened immediately. "Meaning?" Martha looked me dead in the eye. "Meaning somebody approved construction plans without disclosing regulated flood corridor restrictions." There it was. Finally, the first real crack in Patricia's perfect little kingdom. But things got worse about 20 minutes later. Martha disappeared into the back records room and returned carrying another file thicker than a phone book. "You need to see this too," she said quietly. Inside were county inspection notices addressed directly to Silver Ridge HOA from the previous 6 months. Multiple notices, all referencing spillway maintenance concerns and runoff access protection. Every single one stamped received by HOA administration. Patricia had seen the warnings. She did not ignore them accidentally. She buried them. I flipped through the pages faster with every document. Structural review recommendations. Liability advisories. Emergency access reminders. One engineer even wrote in bold letters that shoreline expansion near the eastern corridor could interfere with controlled drainage operations during severe runoff events. Patricia signed for that notice personally 3 months earlier. I remember sitting there staring at her signature, feeling something shift in my chest. Until that moment, I still wanted to believe she was just arrogant, stubborn, maybe careless. But this was different. She knew there was a problem, and she kept building anyway. "Grant," Martha said carefully, "you may want legal counsel involved now." I nodded slowly, already thinking the same thing. On my way out, I nearly ran into Melissa Carter from County Engineering carrying survey tubes under one arm. She saw my face and stopped immediately. "You found something," she said. I handed her the runoff restriction maps without saying a word. Melissa scanned them fast and actually swore under her breath. "They built near the emergency corridor?" "Still building," I answered. Melissa looked genuinely disturbed now. "If snowpack melts heavy this spring and you need emergency discharge, those patios are directly in the flow path." "I know." She lowered the papers slowly. "Grant, if the spillway wall weakens. Further, state safety code could force partial reservoir drainage." There it was. The sentence everything had been building toward. Partial reservoir drainage. Legally required. Suddenly, every smug HOA meeting and fake smile from Patricia replayed differently in my head. She thought she controlled the lake because she controlled the homeowners. But the lake was never the real power. The spillway was. The paperwork was. The law was. And Patricia had accidentally built her entire luxury fantasy directly on top of the one thing she should have respected. Infrastructure. That night, I sat alone beside the reservoir watching moonlight ripple across the water while cold mountain wind rattled the warning chains near the spillway gate. Emily used to love nights like that. Quiet water. Pine trees moving softly in the dark. For the first time in months, I stopped feeling angry. Angry people make mistakes. Calm people document them. So I went back inside the maintenance office and started organizing everything into folders. Inspection reports. County notices. Certified mail receipts. Construction photos. HOA meeting transcripts. Every piece of evidence stacked neatly across my desk. Then I opened a fresh notebook and wrote 6 simple words at the top of the first page. They knew. And they built anyway. Once I realized Patricia had been hiding inspection notices from her own residents, the whole situation changed in my mind. Up until then, I still thought maybe she would eventually come to her senses. Maybe once the county started pushing harder, she would stop pretending this was all about landscaping and luxury branding. But people like Patricia do not back down when they are wrong. They double down because admitting the truth would destroy the image they built around themselves. And Patricia Thornwell loved her image more than anything. The next few weeks felt strange. Calm on the surface. Dangerous underneath. Kind of like the reservoir itself. Patricia kept hosting community events like nothing was wrong. Wine tastings near the shoreline. Outdoor movie nights beside the docks. She even hired a photographer to take sunset pictures for updated HOA marketing brochures. Meanwhile, county engineers were quietly increasing concern levels behind the scenes. Every few days, Melissa Carter would call me with another update. Higher seepage readings. Increased snowpack in the mountains. More pressure building behind the retaining wall. None of it was catastrophic alone. Together? Different story. One afternoon, Melissa stopped talking halfway through a sentence during one of our calls. "Hold on," she said quietly. I heard keyboard clicking in the background. Then silence. "Grant," she finally said, "why does the HOA reserve account only show $42,000? "What do you mean?" I asked. Silver Ridge collected over $800,000 in special assessments over the last 2 years. There should be far more available for emergency infrastructure costs. My stomach tightened instantly. Where did the money go? Melissa exhaled slowly. That is what I am starting to wonder. That call led to the first real crack inside Patricia's inner circle. 2 nights later, somebody slid an envelope under my maintenance office door around midnight. No note, no name, just documents. HOA financial statements, contractor invoices, board meeting summaries. I spread everything across my desk under the lamp and started reading. By 2 in the morning, I understood exactly why Patricia had fought the Spillway repairs so aggressively. She did not have the money anymore. She spent it. Hundreds of thousands of dollars drained into cosmetic projects across the development. Decorative stone entrances, luxury clubhouse renovations, outdoor fireplaces, landscaping contracts, premium lighting systems around the shoreline trails. And the craziest part? Several invoices traced back to companies connected to Patricia's brother-in-law down in Arizona. Suddenly, her obsession with community improvements looked a lot less innocent. I leaned back in my chair staring at the paperwork while rain tapped softly against the office windows. Patricia had gambled everything on appearances. She assumed nobody would ever question where the money went because homeowners were too distracted by pretty views and rising property values. But infrastructure has a nasty habit of exposing fake leadership. You can hide bad finances for a while. You cannot hide failing concrete forever. The next morning, I drove into town and met with attorney Rebecca Sloan. Rebecca specialized in property and water liability law. Sharp woman, mid-60s. No patience for nonsense. I handed her the county reports, HOA notices, financial statements, and runoff maps. She spent almost an hour reading without saying much. Finally, she removed her glasses and looked at me across the desk. "Grant," she said carefully, "you understand this is no longer just an HOA dispute, right?" "Yeah," I answered quietly. "I figured." Rebecca tapped the runoff corridor maps with her finger. If Patricia approved construction inside protected drainage zones after receiving engineering notices, she exposed the HOA to massive liability. And if the spillway fails? I asked. Rebecca did not sugarcoat it. Then everybody involved gets buried in lawsuits for the next 10 years. I nodded slowly. Which is exactly why the reservoir level has to come down if repairs are delayed. "Correct," she said. "Legally and ethically." There it was again. Same conclusion from every direction. Drainage was coming whether Patricia liked it or not. The only question now was how ugly things became before reality finally caught up to her. Funny thing is, Patricia still thought she was winning. That weekend, she posted a smiling video on the HOA social media page standing beside the lake at sunset talking about continued growth and exciting waterfront expansion opportunities. Meanwhile, I was sitting 20 yards away near the spillway taking pressure measurements while emergency drainage protocols sat folded inside my truck. She never noticed me in the background of the video, but I noticed her, especially when she said something that nearly made me laugh out loud. "Silver Ridge has never been stronger," she told the camera confidently. Never been stronger. At that exact moment, the east wall seepage rate had increased another 11%. The reservoir was literally warning us in real time while Patricia filmed lifestyle content for homeowners. A few days later, the final piece landed into place. Melissa called me during breakfast, sounding more serious than I had ever heard her before. "The latest snowpack projections just came in," she said. "If temperatures spike early this year, runoff volume could exceed seasonal averages by 30%. I stared out the kitchen window toward the mountains. "How long do we have?" "Maybe a few weeks before emergency review starts," she answered. "Maybe less." After we hung up, I sat there quietly for a long time holding my coffee while wind rattled the porch railing outside. Then I walked into the office, opened my filing cabinet, and started organizing everything into chronological order. Every county warning, every certified letter, every ignored invoice, every financial discrepancy, every construction photo beside restricted runoff zones. Calm, clean, precise. Because by then I understood something Patricia still did not. The loudest person in the room usually loses once the paperwork starts talking. And soon the paperwork was about to get very, very loud. The emergency order arrived on a Thursday morning right as the first major snowmelt hit the mountains. I heard the county truck before I saw it. Tires crunching slowly up the gravel maintenance road, while cold runoff water thundered through the spillway channels louder than usual. Sheriff Boone stepped out first, looking tired already. Behind him came Melissa Carter carrying a thick yellow folder under one arm. Neither of them smiled. That told me everything. Melissa climbed onto the spillway platform beside me and handed over the paperwork. State Review Board approved emergency mitigation at 6:30 this morning, she said quietly. I opened the folder slowly, even though I already knew what it said. Mandatory controlled reservoir reduction due to elevated structural risk and obstructed runoff pathways. There it was. Official now. Not a warning anymore. Not a recommendation. Law. Boone glanced toward the lake where expensive shoreline homes reflected perfectly across the water in the morning sun. Patricia is going to lose her mind, he muttered. I folded the order carefully and slid it into my jacket pocket. Probably. Then I reached for the spillway control wheel. Funny thing about big moments in life. They almost never feel dramatic while they happen. No music. No slow motion. Just cold steel beneath your hands and years of consequences finally arriving all at once. The first gate release started small. A deep metallic groan echoed through the concrete channel while water pressure surged downward into the lower runoff corridor. The reservoir surface barely moved at first, but water always wins eventually. By noon, the shoreline had already dropped several inches. By 3 o'clock, the HOA Facebook page looked like a digital house fire. Videos everywhere. Angry comments. Drone footage showing muddy shoreline appearing near private docks. Residents demanding explanations. Patricia responded exactly how I expected. Full panic wrapped in fake confidence. Around 4 that afternoon, her Range Rover came flying up the maintenance road, throwing gravel everywhere. She jumped out before the engine even stopped running. You shut those gates right now, she screamed while storm wind whipped her hair across her face. I stayed calm. Cannot do that. This community did not authorize reservoir drainage. The state did. I handed her a copy of the emergency order. Patricia barely glanced at it before crumpling the pages in her fist. You manipulated this whole thing, she snapped. You wanted this. I looked past her toward the lake. Waterline dropping steadily now. Exposed rocks appearing near luxury boat docks. Muddy shoreline spreading outward foot by foot. No, I said quietly. I wanted $30,000 in repairs 6 months ago. That shut her up for about 2 seconds. Then came the yelling again. Lawsuits. Property values. Damages. Threats about the HOA legal team. Same routine she always used whenever reality cornered her. Sheriff Boone finally stepped between us. Patricia, he said firmly, you received multiple county notices regarding spillway safety. That is irrelevant. She fired back immediately. Boone stared at her for a second. Ma'am, that sentence is going to age very badly. By the next morning, the whole community looked different. Docks tilted awkwardly above exposed mud flats. Decorative shoreline lighting hung crooked over dry ground. One family woke up to find their expensive floating kayak platform completely stranded 20 feet from the water. Residents wandered around filming everything with their phones, while contractors scrambled to protect newly built patios near the runoff zones. Patricia tried holding an emergency HOA meeting at the clubhouse around noon. Huge mistake. Nearly every homeowner showed up furious and confused. Some still blamed me at first. Others demanded answers from Patricia. The room felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Patricia stood at the front trying to control the chaos. This situation is temporary, she insisted loudly. Mr. Holloway overreacted to manageable maintenance concerns. Then Melissa Carter walked into the room, carrying county files thick enough to stop conversation instantly. Behind her came 2 state inspectors and a county financial auditor. That was the moment Patricia's face changed. Real fear this time. Melissa set the inspection records down on the table one by one. Silver Ridge HOA received 7 formal infrastructure notices over the past 8 months, she announced clearly. Murmuring exploded across the room immediately. Patricia tried interrupting. Those were preliminary advisories. Melissa did not even look at her. Several notices specifically warned against shoreline construction near emergency runoff corridors. Homeowners started turning toward Patricia now instead of me. One older resident stood up holding copies of the hidden inspection reports. "You told us there was no danger," he said slowly. Patricia opened her mouth, but the county auditor cut in next. "We are also reviewing HOA reserve expenditures related to deferred infrastructure obligations." That sentence hit the room like a grenade. Suddenly people were shouting all at once. Questions about missing money, special assessments, construction contracts. Patricia kept trying to regain control, but it was over. Completely over. The loudest moment came when Melissa projected the runoff restriction maps onto the clubhouse screen, showing exactly where Patricia approved luxury patio construction directly. Inside protected drainage areas. You could actually hear people gasping. One homeowner looked at the map, then looked at Patricia and said the quietest, coldest sentence I heard all year. "You knew?" Patricia started talking fast after that. Excuses. Consultants. Miscommunication. Blaming contractors. Blaming old regulations. But nobody believed her anymore, because the paperwork was finally louder than her voice. Meanwhile, outside the clubhouse windows, the reservoir kept dropping inch by inch exactly the way state law required. Calm. Controlled. Legal. Necessary. I stood near the back wall, while the meeting collapsed around her, thinking about something my grandfather used to say during flood season. Water reveals weak foundations faster than time does. Turns out he was talking about more than concrete. Patricia Thornwell resigned 3 days later. Not gracefully either. She sent out some polished email about protecting community harmony and stepping aside during the review process, but nobody bought it anymore. The truth had already spread through Silver Ridge faster than spring runoff. Homeowners learned she ignored engineering notices. They learned HOA reserve money meant for infrastructure somehow got poured into luxury upgrades and landscaping contracts connected to her own family. Worst of all, they learned the entire lake lifestyle she sold them depended on a spillway system she treated like an ugly inconvenience. Once people understood that, the anger changed. Before, residents were mad because the lake level dropped. Now they were mad because they realized it never had to happen this way. The state investigation moved quickly after that. Financial auditors dug through HOA accounts while county engineers supervised emergency stabilization work around the runoff corridors Patricia approved. Several shoreline patio projects had to be removed completely because they blocked protected drainage flow. Expensive mistake. One homeowner actually laughed bitterly while workers tore out stonework beside his dock. "I paid 60 grand for this patio 6 months ago," he said. "Patricia told us it would increase property value." Sheriff Boone, standing nearby, just shook his head slowly. "Documentation beats sales pitches every time," he muttered. Funny enough, once Patricia lost control of the HOA, people started acting normal again. Neighbors who barely spoke for months suddenly started helping each other move stranded boats and repair shoreline damage from the controlled drainage. Carl Jensen brought coffee to the maintenance site every morning around 6. One younger couple offered to help clear debris from the runoff channel after learning how the reservoir system actually worked. Turns out most people are reasonable once somebody finally tells them the truth. The county approved full spillway repairs 2 weeks later. Real repairs this time. Not cosmetic nonsense. Structural reinforcement. Drainage reconstruction. Gate replacement. The kind of work infrastructure actually needs if you expect it to survive another 50 years. And here is the part Patricia never saw coming. The HOA ended up paying far more than the original $30,000 repair proposal. Between emergency mitigation, legal reviews, reconstruction costs, and drainage corrections, final expenses pushed past $400,000. All because she refused to listen when the problem was still small. That is the thing about maintenance. Ignoring it does not make it disappear. It just makes the bill meaner later. One afternoon during reconstruction, Melissa Carter stood beside me watching crews pour reinforced concrete along the repaired east wall. "Your grandfather built this thing well," she said over the sound of machinery. I nodded. "He built it to work, not to look pretty." Melissa smiled slightly. That might be the smartest thing anybody has said about this lake all year. By midsummer, the reservoir finally stabilized again. Water slowly returned to normal levels. Docks floated correctly. Shoreline plants grew back. The ugly mud flats disappeared beneath clear mountain water, one careful inch at a time. But something else changed too. The community stopped pretending the reservoir was just scenery. New HOA leadership signed formal maintenance agreements with the county and established protected infrastructure funding that could not legally be redirected toward cosmetic projects anymore. Every homeowner received copies of the runoff maps and emergency drainage rules. Real education. Real transparency. Imagine that. They even restored the old warning signs Patricia wanted removed near the Spillway Road. One resident joked that they should put her face on a caution sign somewhere. Honestly, not the worst idea. As for Patricia, last I heard she moved to Scottsdale, Arizona before the financial investigation fully wrapped up. Some people said she was trying to avoid lawsuits. Others said she blamed everybody except herself right until the end. Did not matter much anymore. Water already gave its verdict. Late that fall, after construction crews finally packed up for good, I carried 2 folding chairs down near the repaired spillway just before sunset. One for me, one beside it facing the reservoir. The exact same spot where Emily used to sit wrapped in blankets drinking coffee while morning fog drifted across the water. The air smelled like pine again instead of wet mud and construction dust. For the first time in a long while, the reservoir sounded healthy, stable, honest. I sat there listening to water move through the rebuilt gates while orange light reflected across the surface and thought about everything that happened. Patricia spent years believing control came from appearances, fancy meetings, expensive branding, loud confidence. But real control is quieter than that. Real control comes from understanding responsibility before disaster forces you to. From reading the paperwork nobody else bothers to read. From fixing problems while they are still small. My grandfather understood that. Emily understood that too. And eventually, after one very expensive lesson, Silver Ridge finally understood it as well. Water does not care about arrogance. But paperwork has a funny way of humbling people who do.